Every family has its holiday traditions. For the Matthews, this year's was supposed to be simple. A drive into mountains, a perfect Christmas tree, and a quiet day together away from screens, traffic, and noise. But Coldwater Ridge isn't marked on most maps anymore. The locals don't go up there after the first snowfall. Some say the forest has a way of closing around you, changing the trails, swallowing sound, and making sure you never leave the same way you came in. When a Matthews SUV breaks down miles from help, the silence isn't peaceful anymore. There's something watching from the tree lean, tall, pale, and still as the snow itself. And as night falls, that single figure becomes many, cut off from the world. With no signal, no road, and no way out, one family's holiday tradition turns into a waking nightmare. In the frozen wilderness, some things don't want to be found. Julia Matthews sat in the passenger seat, holding her coffee like a talisman against the cold that seeped through every seam of the car. Her husband, Grant, drove with both hands on the wheel, the way he always did when the road got slick. In the back, their daughter, Ellie, 13, leaned against the window, scrolling through her phone, earbuds in. Her little brother, Sam, 8, hummed tunelessly and watched the trees flash by. It was supposed to be a tradition, their first real family Christmas in years. Grant had insisted they go into the mountains to cut their own tree this time, like his father used to do when he was a kid. No parking lot evergreens, no fake trees with pre-strung lights. "We'll make a day of it," he'd said, smiling. "Hot chocolate, snow, a real tree from the wild. It'll be good for us." Now, halfway up Coldwater Ridge, Julia wasn't so sure. The forest seemed endless, deep, dark, and strangely quiet. Every few minutes, she'd glance into the woods and feel as if something in there might be watching back. Maybe it was just the season getting to her. Or maybe it was that article she'd read last week about a hunter who'd gone missing not too far from here. Grant caught her glance. "You okay?" "Yeah, it's pretty remote." "That's the point," he said, smiling. "We'll get a great tree and be back before sunset." Julia nodded, but her stomach felt tight. They passed a hand-painted sign nailed to a tree. Coldwater Ridge tree cutting area, permit required. Grant slowed, squinting through the windshield. The road curved into a clearing dusted with snow, where 2 other trucks were parked near a ranger station. A small wooden kiosk stood beside it with a red tin box for permits. He parked and turned to the kids. "All right, team, this is it." Sam cheered and lunged to the door. Ellie didn't move. "It's freezing," she muttered. Julia smiled faintly. "Come on. 10 minutes of fresh air won't kill you." They climbed out into the brittle air. The world smelled like pine sap and coal metal. A gust of wind shook the branches, sprinkling flakes that drifted like ash. Grant filled out the permit card, dropped $5 into the box, and taped the pink slip to the windshield. "See? Official," he said. "No bears, no trespassing. Just a family adventure." They set off into the trees, dragging a red sled and a saw. The snow was deeper than Julia expected. Soft but treacherous, hiding rocks and holes beneath. The kids darted ahead, Sam kicking up sprays of white powder, while Ellie trudged behind, her breath clouding in front of her. The forest was beautiful, but it had a strange stillness. No birds, no wind, even just the sound of boots crunching and the faint creak of branches in the cold. After about 20 minutes, Julia stopped and looked around. The car was already out of sight, and the trail behind them had vanished under fresh flurries. Grant pointed ahead. "There, that one." It was a tall spruce, perfect shape, the kind that would fill their living room ceiling to floor. Sam squealed. "That one. It's huge." Grant smiled. "All right, help me clear the base." While Grant knelt to saw, Julia stood a few steps back, her gaze snagged on the slope above them. For a moment, she thought she saw someone between the trees, a pale shape, motionless against the gray bark. She blinked, and it was gone. Her pulse quickened. "Grant, did you see that?" He paused mid-saw. "See what?" "Up there. I thought there was—" She hesitated. "Never mind. Probably just light through the trees." He gave a small, uneasy smile. "City eyes. You're not used to the quiet." Maybe. The saw rasped through the trunk, rhythmic and harsh in the silence. When the tree finally tipped, Sam cheered again, and Grant grinned up at Julia. But she wasn't looking at the tree anymore. Her eyes had drifted back to the ridge. Someone was there. A man, tall, thin, wearing clothes too light for the weather. His coat was gray, his skin almost white against the dark pines. He stood still, facing them, maybe 50 yards away. "Grant," Julia whispered, "there's someone watching us." Grant straightened, frowning. He followed her gaze, but by then the figure was gone. "Probably another family cutting trees," he said, though his tone wasn't entirely convinced. "Come on, let's get this loaded before it starts snowing." They hauled the tree back toward the road, retracing their faint trail. The forest felt different now, smaller somehow, pressing closer. Julia couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Every so often, she heard a faint sound behind them, like soft steps in the snow. When she turned, there was only the wind. At last, the trees thinned, and she spotted the SUV ahead. Relief flickered until she noticed something odd. The other trucks were gone. The clearing was empty except for their car. Grant dropped the sled and frowned. Guess the others left. Julia didn't answer. Her eyes drifted to the forest edge again and froze. The pale man was standing there, at the line where the trees met the clearing. His head tilted slightly, almost curious. He was close enough now that she could see his clothes weren't modern. A wool coat that hung to his knees buttoned high, and trousers that looked worn, almost antique. His face was expressionless, his eyes dark and hollow. "Grant," she whispered. "He's right there." Grant turned, and this time he saw him too. For a moment, no one moved. The man didn't approach, didn't wave, just stood watching. Then, as Grant took a step forward, the man turned and slipped silently back into the woods. "What the hell?" Grant muttered. "Hey, you okay, man?" No answer. Julia grabbed his arm. "Let's just go." He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, okay." They strapped the tree to the roof and climbed inside. Grant started the engine, or tried to. The motor stuttered, coughed, then went silent. Julia's stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "Probably cold. Give me a second." He tried again. Nothing. Then he got out to check the hood. Julia turned to the kids. "Stay in your seats." Through the windshield, she watched Grant walk around the front. He crouched, then froze. When he straightened, his face was pale. He came back and opened the door. "The tires," he said quietly. "They're slashed." "All four." For a long moment, no one spoke, only the sound of the wind through the pines. Julia felt a slow, rising dread. "Grant, what does that mean?" "It means someone doesn't want us leaving," he said. Grant's voice carried that brittle calm he used when something was wrong, but the kids were watching. "Everyone stay inside. I'm calling for help." He pulled out his phone, stared at the screen, then swore under his breath. No signal. Julia checked hers. Nothing either. The forest swallowed everything, even the faint hum of radio static. Ellie leaned forward. "Dad, what's going on?" "Flat tires," he said. "We'll get them fixed. Just stay buckled." Outside, the wind hissed softly through pines. Snow began to fall. Light at first, then heavier, each flake glowing white against the windshield before melting. Julia watched it blur the world into a dull gray haze. Grant climbed back in, rubbing his hands together for warmth. "We'll wait a bit. Someone's bound to drive down eventually." But no one came. Minutes turned to half an hour. The forest darkened. The light seemed to drain faster than it should. Ellie had stopped scrolling through her phone, battery almost dead, and Sam was dozing under his jacket. Julia stared out at the tree line. She thought she saw movement there again, something pale slipping between trunks. "Grant," she whispered. "Look." He followed her gaze, eyes narrowing. "Where?" "There, by that dead pine. I swear I saw him again." Grant exhaled slowly. "Stay here." He reached into the glove box and pulled out the flare gun they'd packed for emergencies. "Grant, no." "I'll just look," he said. "If someone's messing with us, I'm not sitting here waiting." He stepped out and shut the door softly behind him. Julia gripped the steering wheel, every nerve alert. Through the windshield, she saw him cross the clearing, snow crunching under his boots. The flare gun hung loosely in one hand. The woods swallowed him in seconds. Silence. Julia counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. A flare burst overhead, red and sudden. It painted the forest in bloodlight, shadows stretching long and strange across the snow. Then she saw him. The pale man stood at the edge of the trees again, only a few yards from where Grant had disappeared. The red glow washed over his face, hollowing his eyes, turning his skin the color of bone. He didn't move. Behind him, shapes flickered. Others, faint outlines of figures watching from deeper in the trees. The flare sputtered out. Darkness fell again. Julia's heart hammered. She fumbled for the door handle just as Grant reappeared, running hard. He yanked open the driver's side door, slammed it behind him, and locked it. "There's more than one," he gasped. "I saw 3, maybe 4. Ellie's eyes were wide. "What are they doing?" "Watching," Grant said. "They're just standing there." Julia's voice trembled. "We need to leave. Walk out, find a ranger station." He shook his head. "It's miles down the road. In this snow with the kids, we'd freeze before we got halfway." "Then what?" Grant glanced at the gas gauge. "We'll keep the engine off, conserve heat. When the snow stops, I'll hike down." Julia wanted to believe him, but his voice didn't carry conviction anymore. The snow thickened, muting every sound. Time lost meaning. They sat in the dim interior, their breath fogging the windows. Sam stirred and whispered, "Mom, why is it so quiet?" Julia brushed his hair back. "It's just snow, sweetheart." But it wasn't just snow. Beneath the wind, she heard faint crunches, soft, deliberate, like footsteps circling the car. Grant lifted his head. He'd heard it too. He reached for the flashlight, flicked it on, and shone it through the side window. The beam caught something, bare footprints in the snow. Human, small. They led from the tree-lean halfway toward the SUV, then vanished. "No shoes," Grant whispered. "Jesus." Julia felt a wave of nausea. "Who walks barefoot out here?" Ellie's voice was a thin thread. "They're still there. Look." A face pressed briefly against a rear window. White, featureless, gone before anyone could scream. Julia jerked around, but there was only her reflection staring back at her. Grant turned the key, desperate. The engine groaned, coughed, and caught. He threw into gear and tried to drive, but the shredded tires barely moved the car. Rubber flapped uselessly against the rims. "Grant, stop. You'll wreck the axles." He slammed the brakes. The engine idled, rattling. The headlights cut through the snow in 2 hazy beams. Something moved in them. At first, Julia thought it was a tree limb swaying, but then it stepped forward. Another of the pale figures, thin and genderless, wearing clothes that looked decades old, suspenders, a torn flannel, bare hands. Its skin shimmered faintly, as if dusted with frost. It didn't blink, just stared. Grant honked, a sharp blast that shattered the stillness. The figure didn't flinch. Instead, it slowly lifted one hand and pointed to the forest behind them. Then it vanished. Grant threw the car into reverse, instinctively glancing over his shoulder, and froze. Behind the SUV, a dozen figures stood in a half-circle at the tree-lean. Men, women, children. All pale, all silent. The headlights caught their faces for an instant. Expressionless masks, eyes hollow and dark as holes. Julia screamed. Grant floored the gas, but the car only lurched, tires spinning uselessly. The figures didn't move closer. They simply watched. Then, one by one, they turned and melted back into the trees. For a while, no one spoke. The kids were crying quietly. Grant killed the engine and leaned forward, elbows on the wheel, shaking. "I saw them," he whispered. "God, I saw them." Julia swallowed hard. "We can't stay here. Not until daylight," he said. "If they wanted to hurt us, they could have already." Julia wasn't sure she believed that. She kept her eyes on the forest, half expecting one of those faces to appear again between the trunks. An hour passed, maybe 2. The snow stopped. The moon rose, A thin, cold crescent, and light spilled across the clearing. Grant finally exhaled. All right, I'll walk down for help. You lock the doors, keep the lights off. I'll be back by dawn. Julia grabbed his sleeve. You can't go alone. I have to, he said gently. If we all try to walk, we'll never make it. He opened the door, took one last look at her, and stepped out. The forest swallowed him again. Julia locked the doors, turned off the dome light, and held the kids close. The night was black and endless. For a long time, there was only the ticking of cooling metal. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, crunching in the snow, approaching from the direction Grant had gone. She sat upright, every muscle locked. The footsteps stopped beside the driver's door. A long pause. Then something dragged across the metal. A slow scrape, like a fingernail tracing a line. Sam whimpered. Julia covered his mouth gently. The scraping moved along the doors, around the back, then stopped at her window. She didn't dare move, didn't even breathe. A pale hand rested against the glass. She almost screamed, but the hand was wrong. Too long. The fingers jointed oddly, bending backward slightly. Frost bloomed around the touch, spiderwebbing across the inside of the glass. Julia stared, frozen. Then the hand lifted away, and the footsteps retreated, fading into the trees. The forest was silent again. She sat awake the rest of the night, listening to the wind whisper through the pines, praying for headlights that never came. When dawn finally bled to the clouds, it came thin and gray, like light filtered through smoke. Frost rimed the inside of the windshield. Julia blinked, stiff in the cramped night, her neck aching. The passenger seat beside her was empty. Grant had been gone for hours. Ellie stirred under her blanket. Is Dad back? Julia forced calm into her voice. Not yet, honey. He'll be here soon. But she already knew he wouldn't be soon. The silence outside was total. No birds, no snowmelt drip, nothing but the faint groan of trees shifting in the cold. She pushed open the door. The air sliced at her lungs. In the daylight, the clearing looked different. Smaller, ringed by tall pines that leaned inward like a crowd. Their branches were heavy with snow, drooping toward the SUV. She scanned the ground. Grant's boot prints led away from the driver's side and disappeared into the forest road. Just beyond them, a second set of tracks, bare, narrow, crisscross, heading the same direction. Her breath caught. When she looked again, she realized there were many of those prints. Dozens, maybe more, some fresher than others, circling the SUV like petals around a flower. She stepped back, heart thudding. Ellie had climbed out too, hugging her coat tight. Mom, what's wrong? Get back in the car, Julia said. But I just... Now! They shut themselves inside. Julia turned the key to check the fuel gauge. A quarter tank. Enough to keep the heater running for a while if she cycled it on and off. She started the engine anyway, craving the hum, the warmth, something human. Sam woke with a yawn. Where's Dad? On his way back, she said automatically. The radio crackled faintly. She tried flipping through stations, only static, until one channel caught for a heartbeat. A voice, distant and broken. North Slope, search in progress. Then it vanished. She stared at the dial. Search in progress. Someone was out there. She grabbed her jacket. I'm going to climb the ridge. See if I can catch a signal. Ellie's eyes widened. You're leaving us? Just a few minutes. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me. Julia trudged through the snow, following the tire ruts of the road until it curved upward. The climb was slow. The drifts reached her knees. By the time she reached the ridge crest, her breath steamed the air. She lifted her phone. 1 bar. Relief nearly made her dizzy. She hit 911. The screen flickered, connecting, then dropped. She tried again, walking a few steps forward. The bar blinked back in, steady this time. A voice answered. Fuzzy. 911, what is your... Static swallowed it. Hello, Julia shouted. We're stranded off Coldwater Ridge. Tires slashed. My husband's missing. Nothing. The line went dead. Then, faintly behind her, the crunch of footsteps. She turned. A figure stood halfway down the slope. For a moment she thought, hoped it was Grant. Same build, same jacket. But the stance was wrong. Too stiff, too still. The head tilted slowly like a puppet's. Julia took a step back. The phone slipped from her hand, vanishing into the snow. The figure didn't move closer. It simply raised an arm and pointed. Back toward the clearing. Julia's stomach turned cold. She ran. Branches whipped at her face, breath tearing from her chest. When she burst from the tree-line, the SUV came into view, and she froze. The doors were open. "Ellie!" she screamed. "Sam!" Her voice echoed through the clearing. No answer. She stumbled forward, slipped, caught herself. The car's interior was empty, the seats dusted with snow. Tiny footprints, bare, child-size, led from the back door toward the woods. Julia's vision blurred. "No, no, no!" A whisper drifted from the trees. At first she thought it was wind. Then she heard words, soft, overlapping, voices layered too thick to count. "Come back! Come see, stay with us." She spun, searching, but there was nothing to see, only the dark gaps between the pines and the sense that something waited inside them. Then, from the edge of the clearing, Ellie appeared. Her face was pale, her coat unzipped. She walked slowly, like sleepwalking. "Ellie!" Julia ran to her, grabbed her shoulders. "Where's Sam? Where did you go?" Ellie blinked up at her, eyes glassy. "He said we could help Dad." "Who said that?" "The man." "What man?" Ellie lifted a trembling hand and pointed into the trees. Julia followed the gesture and saw, far back among the trunks, dozens of pale shapes standing in the dim light, silent and still as before. At their center, one figure stepped forward. It wore Grant's coat. Julia's breath stopped. Ellie whispered, "You said you'd come too." Julia backed away, pulling Ellie with her. "We're leaving. Now." She shoved her daughter into the SUV, slammed the doors, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared. The tires screamed against the rims. But this time the car lurched free, bouncing toward the road. In the mirror, the clearing blurred past, white and endless. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw movement behind them, a wave of figures breaking into a run, silent even as they closed the distance. Then the trees swallowed everything again. The road was a ribbon of white that wound through endless pines. Julia gripped the wheel with numb hands, her eyes flicking between the mirror and the barely visible curve ahead. The SUV rattled and shuddered with every bump, rims grinding where the rubber had torn away. Ellie sat silent beside her, hugging herself, staring out the window. "Just hang on," Julia murmured. "We'll hit the main road soon. Then someone will see us." But as the minutes dragged on, the landscape didn't change. Every turn looked the same snowdrift, the same crooked pine split by lightning, even the same fallen branch half buried in frost. She slowed, heart pounding. "That's not possible," she whispered. Ellie's voice was small. "Mom, we already passed that tree." Julia stared ahead. The branch lay across the shoulder, exactly where it had been 10 minutes ago. She turned the wheel, forcing the SUV onward. Maybe she looped around, missed a fork. But there were no forks. Just the same narrow road cutting through the same impossible woods. A low hum filled the air, faint, almost like wind through a bottle. It rose and fell, threading through the trees. Ellie pressed her hands over her ears. "Mom, make it stop." Julia switched off the engine. The hum stayed. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive, like dozens of voices humming the same single note, too low for words. The snow began to fall again, fine and silent, thickening until the world turned white. Julia turned to Ellie. "Sweetheart, listen to me. We're going to walk. Okay? The car can't go any farther. Stay close. Don't stop for anything." Ellie hesitated, then nodded. They stepped into the snow. It came to Julia's calves now, soft and treacherous. Every few steps, she had to pull Ellie forward. The forest pressed close, the trunks dark and slick with frost. After a while, Julia realized there were no footprint behind them. The snow filled them in almost instantly, like water closing over a wound. Her breathing quickened. Keep walking. Don't look back. A whisper threaded through the air, so soft it might have been thought instead of sound. Julia. She froze. The voice was Grant's. It came again, closer. Julia. This way. She spun, scanning the trees. Grant. Ellie clutched her coat. Mom, don't. But Julia saw a flicker of color between the trunks. Grant's red flannel. He was standing just beyond the drift, hand raised, smiling. Thank God, she breathed. Grant. She started forward, but Ellie's grip tightened. That's not Dad. Julia looked back at her daughter's pale face. Then she turned again, and the figure was gone. Only the imprint of footprints leading deeper into the forest remained. The humming had stopped. In its place was silence, thick and heavy. Julia felt a strange pull, as if the forest itself were leaning toward her. The air smelled faintly of iron. Then came another sound, laughter, light and distant, like children playing somewhere unseen. Ellie's eyes filled with tears. Mom, where's Sam? Julia opened her mouth, but no words came. The sound of laughter grew louder. 2 or 3 voices, weaving together. Mom! Julia knelt, gripping Ellie's shoulders. Listen to me. No matter what you hear, you don't follow it. You understand? You keep your eyes on me. Ellie nodded, trembling. They turned back toward the road, but it was gone. Where the car had been, only unbroken snow stretched between the trees. Julia's breath came faster. No, no, no. She spun, trying to find landmarks. Anything, but every direction looked identical. The forest had shifted while they weren't looking, closing around them. Julia, the voice again. Closer, behind her. She turned, and there he was, Grant, standing only a few feet away. His face was pale, lips blue, but he smiled like nothing was wrong. Come back, he said softly. It's okay now. Julia took a step forward before she realized Ellie had gone rigid beside her. Ellie whispered, His feet aren't touching the snow. Julia looked down and saw that it was true. The figure's boots hovered a few inches above the ground, the snow beneath them perfectly undisturbed. Something flickered behind his eyes, a faint shimmer like light underwater. Then he spoke again, and the voice was wrong. It carried too many echoes, like others were speaking along with him. You don't have to leave. Julia yanked Ellie behind her and stumbled backward. The figure didn't follow, but she could feel the others now. Shapes moving in the white distance, silent and patient. Everywhere she looked, they stood between the trees, tall, thin, their faces blank as frost. Watching. Ellie whimpered. They're all looking at us. Julia forced her voice steady. Don't look back. Just walk. They trudged through the snow, guided by instinct more than direction. The forest seemed to breathe, branches creaking, snow hissing as if alive. The air grew colder, the light dimmer. Then through the whiteness ahead, Julia saw movement, a glow, faint and golden. It looked like a cabin's window. Look, she gasped. There's someone there. Ellie's hope flickered back. They stumbled toward it, hearts pounding. The glow grew stronger, warmer, until Julia could almost feel heat against her skin. She burst from the trees into a small clearing. The cabin stood there, exactly like she remembered it. Same tin box for permits. Same red sled leaning against the wall. Her stomach dropped. It was a ranger station they'd passed the day before, but the windows were shattered and the sign was half buried in snow. They had come in a circle. Julia fell to her knees, the last of her strength draining away. Ellie crouched beside her. Mom, what if we can't get out? Julia looked up. The forest loomed on all sides. Between the trunks, she could see them again, the pale figures, unmoving, endless. For the first time, one of them stepped into the clearing. Then another, and another. They stopped a few yards away, watching silently, heads tilting in unison like curious animals. Julia pulled Ellie close, whispering into her hair, Don't look at them. Don't listen. But Ellie's voice was barely a breath. They already found us. The figures did not rush or lunge. They only watched, swaying gently, as the air between them and Julia were a tide drawing closer. Julia pulled Ellie backward until their boots hit the cabin steps. The wood groaned under their weight, old and brittle. Inside, the single room was dust gray, the stove cold, the windows shattered inward as though something had once tried to escape. She shoved the door shut and dropped the latch. "We'll stay until morning," she whispered. "Someone will come." Ellie stared at the cracks of light, seeping through the boards. "What if they don't?" Julia didn't answer. She found a half-burned candle on the table, lit it, and watched its tiny flame tremble. The light made the room feel smaller, every shadow sharp. Outside, the wind rose, or maybe it was a whispering again, that low chorus, dozens of breaths folded together. Words formed in it now, almost too faint to catch. "Stay belong, always." Ellie clamped her hands over her ears. "Mom, make them stop." Julia wrapped her in her coat. "Don't listen." She glanced toward the window. Shapes drifted just beyond the glass, pale against the snow, circling slowly. One of them paused at the threshold, its face pressed near the crack, featureless and smooth as porcelain. Then it drew a finger down the door, leaving a thin frost-white trail that hissed and disappeared. The candle guttered. Julia whispered a prayer she couldn't remember the end of. Hours seemed to pass. The flame finally died. Darkness filled the room, soft and heavy. Somewhere far off, the forest cracked like splitting ice. Ellie stirred. "Mom, it's quiet." It was. No wind, no whispers, only stillness. Julia rose and edged toward the door. "Stay here." She lifted the latch slowly and pushed the door open. The clearing lay under a clear sky, silver with moonlight. The footprints were gone. The trees stood straight and ordinary again. No watchers, no movement. "Maybe it's over," she whispered. But when she looked down, she saw new prints leading away from the cabin. 2 sets, side by side, already half filled by falling snow. She turned. Ellie stood behind her in the doorway, smiling faintly, her eyes reflecting the moonlight in a way Julia had never seen before. "Dad's waiting," Ellie said softly. Julia's breath caught. "Where?" Ellie lifted a hand and pointed toward the trees. From the forest came a glow, dim and white, like lanterns drifting through fog. One by one, figures stepped into view, their light pulsing gently, not hostile, almost inviting. In their midst walked a man in a red flannel shirt. Julia's knees gave way. "Grant." He nodded once, slowly. His voice was calm, distant. "It's all right. We can go home now." The light around him grew brighter, spreading across the snow until it was impossible to tell where forest ended and sky began. Julia felt the pull again, not fear this time, but an ache, deep and weary. She reached for Ellie's hand. "Stay close," she murmured. Together they stepped forward into the brightness. The snow rose around their ankles like mist. Then the light went out. Morning came clear and cold. A rescue team found the SUV abandoned near the ranger station. Doors open, keys still in ignition. No tracks led away from it. Only smooth snow, untouched from the night before. On the windshield, frozen in delicate white crystals, were the faint outlines of 2 hands, one large and one small.